Paul Siegert is a managing partner at PCS Advisers, or the health benefits consulting firm. And Paul, welcome back. How's things?
Great. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, frustrated, but I expect nothing more when I found out what's happening on the halls of Congress. We've heard about this for a long time, that we need to lower prescription drug prices. We've got to lower. And in this new plan here to spend our money that we don't have, this has been eliminated simply because they're realizing it's going to cost too much damn money. At least I guess. Where we stand right now?
Well, I think instead what they're doing is they're saying we'll spend the money to expand Medicaid in the 12 holdout states that have not agreed to expand, do the Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act, that have chosen not to. So because it's pretty easy to get consensus around giving insurance companies more money to essentially buy coverage for more people. And I'm not against people getting health care. I'm just saying it's easier in the halls of Congress to get that consensus going. What we're seeing on the drug issue, and by the way, just to add to your intro, we had a most favored nations thing that was gaining steam with Trump, and then when the new administration came in, all those initial executive orders put a lot of those things on hold so that they could be evaluated, which often is the product of good lobbying.
Right.
So now we're looking for a fix for the Medicare to be able to go buy drugs or negotiate. It's the largest purchaser of drugs in the world, the Medicare program. And so the thought was that it would be in the framework, and it's widely liked by Americans. We all believe as a population that Medicare should have some input on how much it pays for drugs, or at least the ability to negotiate. But what we're seeing is magically it is left out of this framework. And when I then pulled up the list of, and they say, there's a few key Democrat people and folks in Congress who are blocking it. So Biden announced his framework and said, well, we're not going to be able to get consensus on that, so we're going to have to leave it out. Well, those people that are blocking it are magically in the top 10 recipients of big pharma money. When you look at them. So I'm writing an article right now on it, and the title is going to be a who's who of big pharma money blocks this whole thing.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's a pittance for them to throw this money. If you can make 60% more, roughly, or 40% more profit than you would in the rest of the world, you throw a couple. I mean, we're talking in the billions now. You throw I don't know, millions of dollars now. We're talking, or tens of millions of dollars in lobbying. That's a cost of doing business. Yeah,
it's nothing at all, and then they're not political. Big pharma is shrewd. It's one of the best run businesses there is. So when you look at where they give money, it absolutely tracks with whoever's in power. And because there's a slim majority right now with Democrats, they're doing some precision spending with key Democrats. And then when you watch those Democrats walk up to the microphone, it's Kirsten Sinema, it's Menendez in New Jersey, it's in the House, you've got Peters over there from San Diego. When you watch them step up to a microphone, they're going to talk about how we have to protect the ability for Big Pharma to continue to do research and development and bring life-saving therapies to the world, when in fact most of that money is not making its way in our system back to these manufacturers of drugs. There are other middle players that are sucking up way more dollars that do nothing to research and develop new therapies.
Well, let's talk about that, Paul Siegert, for a second, because that's typically the response, right? In a linear sense, it's pretty clear. You go, all right, hey, listen, if we limit your profits and what you can take and what you can earn, where's the incentive to develop something new? I think that's pretty common sense, right? And so what they're saying is the more profit we make, we can reinvest that in a whole bunch of other things. Doing this is going to make it harder to attract the capital we need, investment capital, underwriting our research and all those things. But what you're saying is they have more than enough money to do that.
Well, absolutely. And they're spending, depending on what research you look at, in some cases, these companies are spending 10, 15, 20 times more on advertising than they are on R&D, and significantly more on M&A deals to buy small players in the industry where innovation actually occurs. They're buying them up. So it's not really the R&D. It's the pharmacy benefit managers who never get talked about that really are running the industry. I mean, they are, when you look at insulin as an example, 60% of what we as American consumers, what our health plans pay for insulin today, 60% is going to these pharmacy benefit managers, not to the manufacturers of the drugs.
What is a pharmacy benefit manager? When you're on, Paul, I know we've talked about this in the past, but for those who maybe not heard this before, explain the PBM, what they do and what their role is.
Yeah, so they run your formulary. They get to say, yes, the drug can go on the list, and here's what your copay is going to be, and some other coordination around that transaction. But they don't make drugs. They do not wholesale drugs. They do not retail drugs. I just rattle off what a normal supply chain looks like. And then we add in these pharmacy benefit managers. The intention was pharmacy benefit managers would go out and negotiate, because they'd be experts in this industry. They'd go out and negotiate for all of us stupid people, stupid consumers and Medicare and so on. And we see how well that's done when you rattle off the statistic you did at the beginning of this segment, where they made $2 for every dollar they made abroad globally on these top 20 drugs. That's how effective these pharmacy benefit managers have been. And they've added more and more fees over the years. A lot of this is an unintended consequence.
So if you're a manufacturer and you want to get your drug prescribed so you can make money, you got to grease the PBM, basically. You got to incentivize the PBM for this. Like, well, what's going to make your drug stand out from the 3 other drugs that are just like yours? Well, here's your wheelbarrow full of money.
That's right. And they get to negotiate in secret and tell them, hey, if you want your drug on the list, this is how much I need. I mean, it sounds criminal. And in other industries, it probably would be. But the lobbying has made this so effective for them. This is how silly it is. Eli Lilly makes Humalog, insulin, most common insulin used right now. $550 a month is the cost to a plan. $330 of it gets captured by this pharmacy benefit manager in our supply chain. And Eli Lilly actually makes their own generic of the drug. And most plans, most consumers don't get access to that, even though it costs less. And Eli Lilly would actually make more on their own generic than they do on their brands, because they then don't have to pay this big bribe to the pharmacy benefit managers. But the pharmacy benefit managers in our system have the power to say, you know what? Yeah, that one doesn't get to go on the list. So the average consumer doesn't even have access to that.
Wow. So in this role, the PBM, if you got rid of that, and we made, I don't know, it's funny because no one really knows about the pharmacy benefit manager, Paul Siegert. You bring it up, it's probably making your blood boil going, wait a minute, you got a middleman who's dictating? Absolutely, you got a middleman dictating this whole thing. Why isn't this person, or why isn't this on the level of, like, I don't know, a big tobacco company executive? You remember how they vilified tobacco executives, worst job you could have, tobacco lawyers? Why don't we do that with PBMs?
Oh, because they're spending so much money to not get talked about. I mean, the power of lobbying is on display big time. That's the only reason that we're not addressing this better. And yet, a quick example, I was talking to an employer yesterday. They spend $10 million on their health plan. Have between 400 and 500 people that get health care for them and their families. So they spend $10 million. $2.5 million is drugs. And when we did an analysis of that $2.5 million, we can eliminate $1.8 million by cleaning up the practices of the pharmacy benefit manager in their plan. It's incredible, the amount of waste.
Good Lord. That's
that's what we're all paying for.
That's like 85% of the money is going to them.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. And that was a rather extreme example, but it's not hard to find them. And they're just all over. And when you look at the facts that payroll deductions for health premiums have exceeded wage growth year over year over year over year, it's because of all that waste. And that average consumer, that average American family, is shouldering that cost. We're all sharing in that waste so that we can create more billionaires. And
the evil capitalist Republicans are in it, but so are the evil capitalist Democrats who say they're not evil capitalists.
Oh, yeah. If you look at the giving year to date, it's about split down the middle. It's usually... It just follows with who's in power. But right now, because you have a very narrow majority for Democrats, maybe a few bucks more to Democrats, but it's tracking right along with the ratio of how many seats you have.
Which is why we'll never see any action on this. They're smart about it. They're just going to pay them to continue. We're never going to have, and that's why for 15 years Democrats have said this is a huge issue. They propose it, but it never goes anywhere. So why do they keep proposing it? Because it rings true with getting votes, and it's not about serving people. It's about getting elected.
That's it. And now when you think about all the money that's not going to be saved, that could be funding things like dental care for people in Medicare, vision care for people in Medicare. I mean, the list is long of what we could do with those dollars, as opposed to just let the pharmacy benefit managers, suck those dollars out of our system.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, which especially, too, around election time, there's people that are rabid political stooges that follow this stuff like it really matters. It doesn't really matter, does it?
No, I don't see a solution coming from Congress. I see the solution coming from each health plan, that's well managed. Employer-sponsored health plans have the most ability to do something about it, but none of them are even a fraction of the size of Medicare. So that's why big pharma looked at this possibility.
You'd almost have to unionize employer health plans in order to get the leverage you need to have a billy club, at least, to fight against the giant big pharma companies.
Yeah. Yep, and you'd have to have somebody that gets into Congress, or enough of them, that are actually able to hold on to their ideology once they get there.
Not going to happen.
In the face of all their big pharma dollars.
Not going to happen. Yeah, and I'm looking at what was latest proposal here. Again, Paul Seegert's here is a managing partner at PCS Advisers. They're a health benefits consulting firm nationally, about 35 offices throughout the U.S., and talking about the big scam of politics. And yet another one here, which makes me scratch my head if you think this stuff really matters, because when it comes to prescription drugs, it really doesn't matter. Republicans have been lambasted about keeping drug prices high, but President Trump said, I want to lower prescription drug prices. Didn't do it. For 15, 20 years, Democrats have said the same thing. Joe Biden wants to lower prescription drug benefit plan, and it's not happening. It's not happening because they're getting paid off by the big pharma companies in order to keep the prices high, to the tune where we paid our top 20 selling drugs in the United States was over $101 billion in 2020. The same top 20 selling drugs collected $57 billion outside of the United States, meaning we're overpaying by roughly 40% here. So it goes to show you that where things stand, it's not going to change because of the intense lobbying ability and the smartness of those in big pharma. And I don't want to make it sound like big pharma, they're evil, opiates, this whole thing. They have made the quality, they've made our lives arguably better, certainly, and also have prolonged our lives. The things we used to die and suffer from, we're not doing it anymore because of pharmaceutical companies. So I don't want to be misconstrued, and I'm sure you don't either, Paul, that we hate big pharma companies. Our lives are better because of it. But there's an abject amount of greed here that needs to be controlled by the government and the people that we elect to be referees, not partisan hacks.
Exactly, and it's not. I always try in these conversations to point out the fact that the waste isn't really with the manufacturers of these drugs. They are doing a service for the world. We're overpaying for it, but it's not really as a result of misbehaviors on the part of these drug manufacturers. It's the misbehaviors we've allowed to grow up in the system between the manufacturer and us as consumers. It's incredible, and it would not be hard to fix. I mean, I've written an article on it.
How do you fix it? Give me the fix for this.
You do three things and we could fix this overnight. It's just, can we ever get the political will to do it? Number one, eliminate rebates. That's the waste that's adding 30 to 60% to the cost of the drugs that largely benefits these pharmacy benefit managers. That's the bribe money that they require the manufacturers pay them so that the drug can get them less. So eliminate rebates.
So if I'm a prescription benefit manager, I get a rebate, which is just basically a check from the company that goes to me and my company in order to facilitate me approving that drug and making sure it gets prescribed more so than other drugs. And it's a bidding war that goes on. Okay, I get that. But like we saw with campaign financing, doesn't they just find another way to get there? They'll just find a loophole, won't they?
Well, if we eliminate rebates and then require transparency, that's the other issue, is they're allowed to do all this stuff in the dark. There was a law that was getting passed in California, 6 months ago or something, and it was written into the law that even the hearings around the law would not be subject to any public audience, and they would be sealed. I mean, that's foolishness. You need transparency. So we have to eliminate rebates. Then we need some common sense regulation that actually requires transparency. As a consumer, I should know that $550 I pay for insulin, where is that money going? And then we need to allow fair cash pricing. That would be my number two solution. Believe it or not, if you're a pharmacy and you accept someone's insurance card when they come in to get a prescription. You're not allowed to determine your own cash price for that if someone just wants to pay cash. The insurance company, these pharmacy benefit managers, and the whole system, they get to dictate to you what that cash price should be, and naturally they inflate the cash price that you're allowed to tell a consumer above what their supposed discounted price is. That is absolute monkey business. I mean, that's incredibly ridiculous. So you have to allow a fair cash price, because that's the fact that we don't have that is incredible. And then we need to reform. Number 3 would be we have to reform the orphan drug rules and some of the rules that we have that allow not only a period of time for a company to have a patent and exclusivity on a drug. That makes sense, because that's part of what drives innovation, to be able to make profit for bringing these life-saving therapies. Got it. But should they be able to do things that extend it, that are really not that ethical? Should we reward the orphan drug development the way we do? That's gotten perverted in the way that it's evolved. But, look at Humira. It's the most commonly prescribed specialty drug right now. There's 3 or 4 or 5 generics in use for that drug in Europe that consumers can get for a few $100 a month. Our consumers are still paying $5,000 and $10,000 a month. It's past its exclusivity, but believe it or not, we allow in our system for a drug maker to essentially pay a generic company off to not make a generic and sell it.
Holy crap!
It's like it's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable.
We allow.
Maybe the thing is we should be allowed to buy our drugs from other countries, but also, I think of this, Paul. Credit cards. You look at the back of a credit card statement; it shows you your fees, APR, all that stuff. Gasoline. You go to it shows you the federal and state taxes on there. Cigarettes says this will cause cancer. Why don't we have that on a bottle of prescription drugs that shows you where the money's going from that particular? Here's your cost, and here's where it's all going.
Exactly.
Do something like that.
Transparency. If we could say in one word what would fix all this, transparency.
Yeah.
Because the consumer would just absolutely, there would be outcry against all this. We know.
No doubt.
Every consumer knows they're getting taken advantage of, but they're not able to pinpoint it and say, hey, here's the problem. Yeah. If they could, I think some solutions would come forward.
No doubt. Paul Siegert is a managing partner at PCS Advisers. They're a health benefits consulting firm, and always love the insights. Always good stuff, Paul. Thanks again for coming on the show. Be well.